This is not a book about numbers. It is a book about what happens to people who stand at the edge of everything and choose to walk away. 2 years after Egypt, Israel is fed. Israel is armed. Israel has seen fire come down from heaven, water come out of a rock, bread appear on the ground every morning for 2 straight years. They have run out of excuses. They are standing at the border of the land God promised their ancestors 400 years ago. And what happens next will cost them 40 years. This is Numbers. Book 4 of 66, and nobody talks about it, because it is too honest about what human beings actually do when God asks them to trust Him. Stay with this. It has been 2 years since the Exodus, since the Red Sea, since Sinai. And in those 2 years, God has been building something. Not just a people, an army. The census at the beginning of Numbers is not bureaucracy. It is a war count. Every man 20 years old and older who is able to go to war, counted by name, counted by tribe. 603,550 men. Plus women. Plus children. Plus the Levites who served the tabernacle and were not counted for war because they had a different role. This nation, 2 million people or more, is organized, numbered, and positioned. The cloud of God sits over the tabernacle. When it moves, they move. When it stops, they stop. Everything is in order. God has done everything. The people have one thing left to do. Walk forward. Before the march begins, something remarkable happens. The Nazirite vow is established, a voluntary covenant for ordinary people to consecrate themselves to God for a season. No wine. No cutting the hair. No contact with death. An act of total surrender available to anyone who wanted it. And then, the priestly blessing. The words God Himself gave Aaron to speak over the people before they moved. The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord makes His face shine on you and be gracious to you. The Lord turns His face toward you and gives you peace. These words are still spoken in synagogues and churches around the world today. They have been spoken for 3,000 years. God gave them to a desert people on the edge of a promised land, the same words, unchanged. Everything is in place. The blessing has been spoken. The cloud is moving. The trumpets sound. Israel marches toward Canaan for the first time. And then, 3 days in, the complaining starts. They are tired of the manna. They want meat. They remember Egypt, the fish, the cucumbers, the garlic, as though Egypt were a restaurant and not a slave camp. Moses is overwhelmed. He tells God he cannot carry these people alone. God sends 70 elders to share the burden. God sends quail, so much quail it piles up 2 cubits deep around the camp for a day's walk in every direction. The people eat. And then a plague strikes them while the meat is still in their mouths. This is the pattern that will repeat for 40 years. The provision is always enough. The faith is never enough. But none of it, is the moment that costs them everything. That moment is still coming. God heard them weeping. And His response is one of the most precise judgments in all of Scripture. Not one person 20 years old or older who refused to go forward will see the promised land. Not one. Joshua and Caleb alone will survive. Because they followed God wholeheartedly. You sent 12 men for 40 days. They brought back fear. And now you will wander for 40 years. Until every last one of you who chose the desert over the promise has died in it. We would rather die in the wilderness. God said. So be it. The 40 years begin. And almost immediately, a new threat emerges, not from the outside, but from within. Korah was a Levite, already set apart for God's service. He had a role, a calling, a position of honor. But he looked at Moses, and decided that God's arrangement was unfair. He gathered 250 leaders of the community. And he said, "You have gone too far. The whole community is holy. Why do you set yourself above them?" Moses fell face down. He told Korah, "God will show who belongs to him. Come before the Lord tomorrow. All of you." The next morning, Korah and his followers stood at the entrance of the tabernacle with their censers. And the ground opened. The earth swallowed Korah and his household and every person in possession associated with them, alive, into the pit. The ground closed over them. They were gone. And fire came from God and consumed the 250 men who had offered incense. The community blamed Moses the next day. God sent a plague. Aaron ran into the midst of the congregation with incense burning, standing between the living and the dead, and the plague stopped. 14,700 people died in that plague, because they blamed the man God chose instead of examining their own hearts. The enemy that destroys a people is rarely the enemy outside the camp. The 40 years continue. The pattern continues. God provides. The people complain. God responds. The people forget. God provides again. And then, Numbers chapter 21. The people speak against God and against Moses again. They are tired of the manna. They are tired of the wilderness. They have been walking in circles for decades. God sends venomous snakes into the camp. Many people die. The people come to Moses. They repent. They ask him to pray that the snakes be taken away. And God gives Moses an instruction that makes no obvious sense. Make a bronze serpent, put it on a pole. Anyone who is bitten, if they look at it, will live. Not pray a certain prayer. Not perform a ritual. Not earn it. Look. The cure was the same shape as the thing that was killing them. To be healed, you had to look directly at the very thing you feared. An act of faith, not logic. No explanation. Just look and live. 40 years have passed. The generation that refused has nearly all died in the desert. A new generation has grown up. And they are doing the same thing their parents did. There is no water. They come to Moses. They quarrel with him. They wish they had died with their brothers. Why did you bring us out here to die? There is no grain, no figs, no vines, no pomegranates. And there is no water. God tells Moses, "Take the staff. Gather the assembly. Speak to the rock before their eyes, and it will pour out water." Moses takes the staff. He gathers the assembly, and then, 40 years of carrying a complaining people wearing away at something inside him, he speaks to them instead of the rock. "Listen, you rebels. Must we bring you water out of this rock?" And he strikes the rock. Twice. Water pours out. Enough for the entire community and all their livestock. And God says to Moses and Aaron, "Because you did not trust me enough to honor me as holy in the sight of the Israelites, you will not bring this community into the land I give them." 40 years. Every plague, every provision, every moment of intercession where Moses stood between an angry God and a faithless people and asked for mercy, all of it. One moment of exhaustion. One strike instead of a word. He will not enter Canaan. There is something almost unbearable about this moment if you sit with it. Moses did not lose Canaan for being unfaithful. He carried that people for 40 years with a faithfulness that had no parallel. He stood between them and God's judgment more than once and interceded for them at cost to himself. He lost Canaan because faithfulness is not a savings account. There is no balance large enough that you can draw from it when you decide the rules no longer apply to you. Moses knew who God was better than anyone alive, and in the one moment where that knowledge should have translated into total trust, it didn't. He was tired. He was human. He was right about everything, except that moment. And one moment was enough. If that feels harsh to you, you are reading Numbers correctly. Numbers does not sanitize this. It sits with it. The most faithful man in the Torah does not cross the Jordan. And then, in a move that is easy to miss inside such a devastating chapter, the daughters of Zelophehad approach Moses. Their father has died and left no sons. By the law as it stood, his name and inheritance would die with him. They stand before Moses, before Eleazar the priest, before the leaders, before the whole assembly, at the entrance to the tent of meeting. And they ask for what is right. Moses brings their case to God. And God says, they are right. Give them their father's inheritance. And change the law. Even in a book of judgment, God made room for those who asked. But Numbers does not end in defeat. The old generation is dying. The new generation is growing. A second census is taken, and the numbers are almost identical to the first. A new army. A new count. The same promise. And in the final chapters of Numbers, something shifts. The new generation, the sons and daughters of the people who refused, are fighting. They defeat the Midianites. They are allocated land east of the Jordan. They are asking the right questions. The daughters of Zelophehad asked, and God answered. A new generation is standing at a border again. This time, they will go in. Numbers asks one question. And it is not about ancient Israel. The generation that died in the desert had more evidence of God's faithfulness than any generation in history. They had seen fire come down from the sky. They had watched a sea part. They had eaten bread that appeared on the ground every single morning for 2 years. And it wasn't enough. Not because God failed them. Because they looked at the evidence they had, and decided it still wasn't enough to trust the next step. What border are you standing in front of right now? Not Canaan. Your border. The thing God has been building you toward. The thing you can see, right there, that you have talked yourself out of. Not because you lack evidence. Because the giants still look bigger than the promise. God is not waiting for you to feel ready. He has never waited for that. He waited for 40 days while 12 spies were in the land, and 2 of them came back saying, "Let's go." The question Numbers leaves is not, was God faithful? The question is, what will you do with the evidence you already have? Numbers ends where it began. A new generation stands at the border of Canaan. The cloud is moving again. The trumpets are about to sound again. Moses is still alive. But not for long. Before he dies, before he watches from a distance as the people he carried for 40 years finally cross into the land he will never enter, he has one thing left to say to them. He has 30 chapters left to say it. That is Deuteronomy. Book 5 of 66. The last sermon of the most faithful man in the Torah. Everything he learned in 80 years of following God, poured out in a final address to a people he loves more than his own life. You will want to be here for it. Subscribe and turn on notifications. Deuteronomy drops next Sunday, and it is Moses' final words before he dies. You will want to be here for it. Tell me in the comments, which feels heavier, the 40 years the people wandered, or what Moses lost at the end. I will read everyone's comments.